Hello, my name is Joe Glines. I'm from The Automator, and the video you're about to watch is actually an extraction of a big chunk of the course I have on Intro to AutoHotkey up in Udemy. So I wanted to give value. I picked out the juiciest, the best things. It's about half the course, but there's over 2 hours of video here, and I walk through everything in these videos. Again, you're getting what's actually in the Udemy course. If you're interested in it, there is more. Go check it out in the Udemy store. Actually, go to my site, theautomator.com. Go there and you'll find the section called Learn AutoHotkey. And in there, you can get a coupon code and buy it for the cheapest price around. So I hope you like this course. Well, this extraction of the course. It's got quite a bit of content and value. AutoHotkey is an amazing tool, and I packed into here the stuff that I think most people are going to want to hear. And so I hope you like it. Check it out. If you like that, go check out the Udemy course. Either way, learn AutoHotkey. It's a great thing to save you time, save you money, save you your brain, because the mundane stuff we do every day on a computer just drives us nuts. All right, cheers. Hi, my name is Joe Glines, and I am recording this video on AutoHotkey, and basically it's an intro course on how to use AutoHotkey. I want to give you a little background about myself. So I'm not a programmer. I've been using AutoHotkey for about 9 years, I'd say now, somewhere in there. And I think I'm uniquely qualified to present this to you because I have worked through it from a non-programmer's perspective. And so what I present in here is going to be a lot of programming, but it's coming from someone that's like you, that hasn't actually done necessarily programming before or in AutoHotkey. So it's a real intro course. In it, we're going to find ways to work smarter, not harder. That's my whole goal. AutoHotkey is a means to its ends. I love it because it's simple to learn and easy to use. But sometimes I use other tools. But for this video and this course, we're going to learn how to use AutoHotkey. So hope you appreciate it. You can find me at over the automator.com, the-automator.com, and I have a lot of free videos there. This is going to be much more focused of an intro course and the process and flow and how to go over it. So I hope you enjoy it. Thanks. So before we get started deep diving into AutoHotkey, I wanted to talk a little bit about what AutoHotkey is and what it isn't. So when you think about RPA, and RPA stands for Robotics Process Automation, I really hate that term. It makes everyone think of robots. We're not dealing with robots, but software in itself can be considered a robot. So what I do is I throw in the virtual. When you think of virtual robots, it makes a lot more sense. It's not real robots, but it's basically something sitting on your computer that is going to interact with another program. And there's a spectrum here where the RPA assisted, that means a human is still usually involved versus the unassisted where a human's not involved. And in AutoHotkey, we're in one of these two areas. More often than not, when I'm using it, I'm in the assisted mode versus unassisted as it basically stands by itself. And then there's the AI and machine learning type stuff. And in those, it's very unstructured data. It's not things. Now granted, actually, I led a webinar on neural networks, which is in that kind of realm, but we're not touching it in this course because this is just an intro to AutoHotkey and an intro to automation. This top part here, notice it says trigger based. So the RPA assisted usually means we're going to either hit a hotkey or use a GUI or something, and so it's not going to act on its own, right? We're going to tell it to go ahead and run. The rules based, this is when it's unassisted. You have to have some logic in there, which we can definitely do with AutoHotkey. It's not that hard to do it, but more often than not, we're going to be playing in the assisted area. This one, the AI stuff, the data itself, notice both of these are structured data. This one's very structured, and this one has to be structured as well. This one's unstructured data, and frankly, it's a pain to deal with. So I have a background in data science. I used to be a data scientist for years, and doing some machine learning stuff and things like that, where it's processing data, huge amounts of data. It's not necessarily something you typically do with AutoHotkey, and so we're not going to be touching that. The other thing I want to distinguish is AutoHotkey is a desktop automation tool, not a server or cloud-based automation tool. It confuses a lot of people when you start talking about automation and you explain what you're doing. And specifically, of course, AutoHotkey is built for running on Windows. So I've used it on Windows XP, Windows 7, Windows 8, Windows 10, and it works, for the most part, works equally across all of them. There's some subtle little differences that maybe we'll talk to, but for the most part, everything is Windows 7 and 10, and not many things have changed since then. So for the most part, we shouldn't see any big problems with that. So hopefully that explains a bit about automation. My whole thing is I want to get to where I'm automating my work and of course my daily life as well. But I don't really care about the type of tools and terminology, right? It's about what can the software do for me. So here we go. Thanks. Hey, so before we get too much into actually programming an AutoHotkey, I want to explain, what AutoHotkey is, why we should care about it, what can it do. And right here, we're going to talk about some of the cool things it can do. So honestly, I love AutoHotkey, but it's a means to an end. So I don't really care necessarily what tool I'm using, as long as it saves me time and makes allows me to work smarter, not harder. And so why am I picking to do this on AutoHotkey? One is there is no course on this, and it's an amazing tool. I call it the Swiss Army knife for Windows, right? So it only works in a Windows environment, but it allows so many things. I have a list here, and part of this is just teasers because some of these things are pretty advanced, and we're not going to get into them in this course. But I had to have this course in order to have an advanced course, so I wanted to get this one done. But there's a thing called the Windows API, and that's basically a programming interface where you can interact with. So virtually almost anything in Windows, any of the settings, all the things you want to do, like let's say adjust your desktop or detect how big your desktop is, or the user settings or the time settings or stuff in your registry, right? All these things you can access with the Windows API and configure things like there's no tomorrow. So it's pretty amazing. There's things called hotkeys and remapping of keys, and so we're gonna go into those. Those are really helpful. They're low hanging fruit. You can pick those things up in a second. Usually it'll trigger an event or something. Or fix a program. It can adapt it to what your needs are. Hotstrings. I actually have a Udemy course on Hotstrings. Jackie Stuck and I have a course on that, and I'm going to touch on them in here, but because I have it so deeply covered in the other one, we're not going to dive real deeply into them. But they are, to me, they are the lowest hanging fruit of how you can work smarter, not harder right away. You can also manipulate files and folders. So if you have to often like backup files or move files in a certain way, or select certain files and then move them, it's a great tool for that. It's very easy and intuitive. You can programmatically have access to your clipboard, so anything you can highlight on the screen, you can automatically, basically you can either send a mouse keystroke or whatever, but copy it to the clipboard, manipulate what's in it, and then possibly output it to whatever window you want, or to a file or whatever you want. There's many ways to connect to programs that you currently interact with. The very first one is one of my favorites, is working with COM, the Microsoft Component Object Model. And programs like Excel and Word and Outlook and PowerPoint, right, and a lot of other programs too, even SPSS I was using, it has a COM backbone, which allows you to programmatically access it and do things to the program lightning fast, highly reliable, very easy once you get used to how to code in it, very easy to do. The other one, which I thought I had in the list here, but I took it off because it's part of web scraping, is you can automate IE with COM, and that allows you to scrape data or to fill in data on a form, right? So either way, it's a great way. It's a great skill to have in your tool set of being able to do stuff. Then there's things like connecting to controls. So older tools, not like Word, which is what I have open here with the ribbon, but other tools that are not quite legacy, but they're a bit older, that don't have the ribbon in them. They have controls in them, and even the ribbon has some controls that you can access. But that's one way to programmatically access it. Then there's the Windows send message and post messages, and that can programmatically interact with programs. DLL calls is another way. It's a little more sophisticated, but you can do that. And then when we get down to the bare, when you can't do it the quote-unquote smart way, you can send keystrokes and you can send mouse clicks. And so just depending on what you're doing, I start usually at the top end here with COM and see if I can automate it that way. And if not, I will end up sending keystrokes or mouse clicks if I can't do it from any of these other approaches in between. And then there's things with text, right? Like if you want to strip off the first part or trim white space or get deep dive into regular expressions. I have I think around 8 or so videos on my site talking about regular expressions with AutoHotkey. Maybe at some point I'll make a Udemy course on it, because they're amazingly powerful. Once you understand its pattern recognition when you're looking for things, it's super helpful. You can also, this is an amazing one, connect to web service APIs. So earlier I mentioned the Windows API. Well, web service APIs, those are basically tools that people have a server online somewhere that you can connect to and programmatically send queries to it and return the data you want. And a lot of vendors have tools out there now that are free to use, usually, not always, but usually. Sometimes they charge you just for the access, sometimes it's per transaction and whatnot, but there are literally, I think it was over 20,000 that I had seen the last one. I'm sure it's a lot higher than that by now, of different services out there. And so I've connected to dozens, from Google itself to Yelp to, boy, you name it. I mean, there's so many APIs, and like I said, for the most part, they're free, and it's lightning fast compared to doing web scraping or some other sources. So, and the data doesn't change. So there's big advantages to that. Then there's creating GUIs is another big one, where you build your own tool, right, with AutoHotkey and building GUIs. GUIs are a bit different, and we're not going to cover them in this tutorial either, but they are great, and we'll cover basic things like an input box or message box. But creating a GUI, a simple GUI, isn't that hard. You can do some advanced stuff with them, though, but GUIs themselves are pretty tricky. So anyway, this is why, I mean, the big reason it gets back to is you have work to do, and all the things I just mentioned are different approaches, and there's probably 24 more that I should have mentioned here of ways that you can do stuff with AutoHotkey, the types of things you can do that can just save you a ton of time. So this is why I thought it was critical to get this core training down, and then I'll make an advanced course later getting into using COM and sending DLL calls also with the post messages and controls and things like that. But without this fundamental entry level, I couldn't do the other one. I felt like people would be saying, like, I don't know how to do that, and so I wanted to get this one done. So anyway, cheers. So what is AutoHotkey? It's a scripting language tool that was created by Chris Mallett. Chris was a developer for AutoIt, and so AutoHotkey is basically a fork of it. Back in 2003, he had some directions he thought it should go. The AutoIt community decided that they didn't want to go that direction, and so he created this, and it's a wonderful thing he did, because after that, AutoIt became no longer open source. It's closed source. You don't have to pay for it, but you can't just distribute it without doing some other stuff. There are other tools out there for doing both desktop automation and server-based automation, and like Automation Anywhere, UiPath, and Blue Prism. All three of those, I think at least two of them offer a free license version to a minimum use, but many of them cost $10,000 per license. And so for every app, or they call it robot that you create, you have to have a separate license. And then also, if you have if you have one for the development, you'd have to have one for both the development and then for your actual live implementation. So for one bot, that's like 20 grand. So as you can see, the price wise, it's great with AutoHotkey, right? It's free. You can't sell the quote-unquote AutoHotkey script. It's the source code, but if you compile a script in AutoHotkey, or you share your scripts with other people, that's no problem at all. I do want to emphasize here, though, both, or I shouldn't say both, UI automation, Automation Anywhere, UiPath, Blue Prism, all of those are GUI-based, and so you have drag and drop things. Now, that was done purposely to try to make it easier for people to pick up and to use, so people can come in and write a script. Like, we'll have a programmer come in here and lay it out. And I shouldn't say programmer, because they're not programmers. They're much more understanding about the process of things. And so they come in and they lay out how the script's going to work. And then the idea is that people will stay behind. People at the company that they've developed it at, one of them will be dedicated to keeping it updated and tweaking it. Having said that, it usually doesn't happen, right? They end up having to hire out back to the original company that did it, because not many people in the office actually pick this up. So yes, the coding, programming side of things takes a little longer than just using a GUI. However, once you get used to it, I find it much, much faster when I've looked at other things compared to like Automation Anywhere or UiPath. I can do stuff in AutoHotkey in seconds, whereas for that it takes, can take a while. Of course, it depends on how much of a library you have and whatnot as well. The scripts themselves are text files, and so you can open them in Notepad or anything that'll read a text file. I'm going to demonstrate here in a couple minutes the editors that we'll use after we install it. It can be run without being installed, so you can actually have the executable like on a thumb drive and then launch it from there. But it is easy. You can right-click and compile it, and so we'll demonstrate that here in a minute. But that's the gist of what AutoHotkey is. It's a tiny file itself. It's, I think, about 1.5 MB, super small, and then each of your scripts, depending on how many lines they are, generally speaking, they're still under 1 meg, right? I don't think I have any that are over 1 meg. So they're very small, lightweight. The thing is, for the most part, AutoHotkey it has some core stuff itself, but it's really leveraging a lot of stuff built into Windows through that Windows API. So a lot of the GUIs you use, the list boxes, the tree views, those are all actually leveraging the Windows API, and so it doesn't have this big overhead that other programs might have. Python, I know, can be much larger, and also Python, when you install it in other scripting languages like that, don't necessarily come with a core, and you have to download all these libraries. You'll definitely be working with libraries on AutoHotkey at some point, but it's not nearly as frequent of an issue as it is with some other languages. Cheers. All right, so we're ready to create our first AutoHotkey script. One of the easiest ways to create a script is to be in Explorer and right-click and say New, and since you have installed AutoHotkey, there should be AutoHotkey script right here. When we click that, it creates a default script here. It's called New AutoHotkey script. Let's change this to test 1 because we're going to have a test 2 here in a minute. And now I'm going to right-click and edit this. And even though hopefully you've installed AutoHotkey Studio, if not maybe one of the other editors, but by default, it might be Notepad, which you can see, yeah, you can read this text, but it's not easy to read. So I like to, first thing I do is change the default in Studio to tell it to use AutoHotkey Studio. So let's do that. So I'm going to launch AutoHotkey Studio. I created a little shortcut in my quick launch toolbar area. And so I'm going to launch it. And what we want to do is I'm going to hit Alt-M. Now Alt-M brings up the Omni search window, and we're just going to start searching for default editor. So see right here, it's set as default editor. When I click that, now it's going to say AutoHotkey Studio is your default editor. Great, thank you. And even when I close this, now when I right-click any .ahk script and say Edit Script, it's going to pull up Studio instead of Notepad. So that's the first one. Now Cite, when you do it, the first time you run Cite, it'll ask you if you want it to be the default editor. If you're running Cite, I would definitely say yes. And I assume Notepad++ has a similar process for that. If not, you can go into your registry and change it, which is kind of tricky, so I wouldn't necessarily take that approach. You can change the file associations as well, but it has to be edit, not run. So anyway, as you can see here, there are some default values in your code. I'm going to delete some of these. There's no environment. This is good. It's kind of advanced, so I'm not going to get into the why, but I would definitely leave that one. These other ones, usually I take these out. I don't use those. However, let's go back into my little cheat sheet here. The one, and I don't understand why this is not a default, but the single instance force. Oh, and look, it brought in my B. How nice. That will tell AutoHotkey that, hey, if this script is already running, when I launch it, don't run a second version, keep this version running. And so 5% of the scripts that I create, I only want one version of them. I don't want multiple versions of them running. So this is something that to me should be the default in everything you're doing, and you always want to have it in there. It's something that you really want to have in your default. So force. So for lack of a better term, once at a time. So those are the two default settings that I recommend you have in there. There are other ones, and maybe we'll add a few later on, but right now, these are the ones, these are the core. Make sure you have those in there. So we've set the defaults. Now we're going to run, save, and edit the script. So let's say we want to do a message box. And so we're going to start typing here, message, and see how Studio is assisting you. So a message box. And now in AutoHotkey, if you're just using text, you don't have to put in any sort of quotes or percents or anything. So I'll say, hello world. And now in AutoHotkey Studio as well, I can hit Alt-R, and it will run it. Or if I do the Alt-M and type run, you'll see right here, run, that was the Alt-R. That's the hotkey that's built into Studio for doing it. I can also choose if I want to run it as different versions of AutoHotkey. But I'm going to hit Alt-R, and it's going to run it. And here is my message box, hello world, right? That's how easy it is in AutoHotkey, right? It technically could remove these two other lines. So it'd be one line, hello world, we're done. But when I hit OK, now notice also this green H here, right? See, that's test 1. It's running. When I hit OK, because there's nothing else in the script, it's going to exit out of it. So when I hit OK, watch the bottom right. So there it goes. It disappeared, right? Let me do this again. I'm going to launch it, and you'll notice when I launch it, it shows up down here. There's the script that's showing that this script is running, and when I hit OK, it closes. So because we don't have any hotkeys or anything else that keeps the script running, we could tell it to stay persistent and then it would stay running, but right now we don't want that. So in order to make a change, so we can change this hello world, how are you? Question mark. Now if I didn't save this, of course, if I just go to run it, oh, actually Studio, I forgot, Studio is smart enough to say, hey, you know what? We're going to save this thing before we run it, because why would you want to run something you haven't saved yet? So it'll automatically do it. The other tools don't do that. At least I don't know about Notepad++, but Cite and Notepad don't do that on their own. So you always want to save it, and then, or if you're in Studio, you don't have to. And so it's not currently running right now, but let's say it was running, and I want to demonstrate this. So the little icon down here, I can right-click this, and I have some interesting options. Right there's an edit this script. So let's go ahead and close Studio. Now, if I right-click on this and say edit this script, it is going to pull up Studio and then focus on that script. So it's a great easy way. If you have a script running and you want to edit it, you can jump into it that way. You can also tell it to reload this script, and there's one message box. What I should do is have a second one here, but it doesn't matter. When I hit reload, you're going to watch this thing flash, right? So I'm going to reload the script, and it just reloaded it and put back up that same message box. So that's another way that when you're doing stuff, you want to save it and reload it. Just remember, because if you don't save it, most of the tools don't automatically, save for you. And then when you, if you don't reload it, it doesn't put it back into memory. So you got to make sure you save and reload, save and reload. The next part I want to demonstrate is compiling scripts. So let's go ahead and, well, I'll just hit the OK, and it'll exit out of it. So now it's no longer running. Let's say I wanted to share, I've written something, I want to give it to another person that's running a Windows environment. I can come into Explorer here, and I can right-click and say compile script. And so it'll automatically create an executable in the same folder, and this will run. It has what it needs to run on the other computer. So a lot of other languages, it's much harder to compile scripts and can be a pain. And there are some little nuances in advanced stuff with this, but for the most part, it's that easy. Let me delete this. If you're in Studio and you want to compile it, you can do Alt-M and say compile, and actually you can choose which version you do, but this will do virtually the same thing here. So it creates it here. The other thing I'd like to point out is, notice my actual script is just 1 kilobyte. The compiled version is, it's closer to a meg, and that's because it's taking the actual AutoHotkey executable and then taking this test_1 script and merging them together, basically, and then saying, give me everything I need to make this an executable, and that's why the file size goes up. So let's go back to here. All right, we talked to okay, so there was the message box, compiling scripts, and some basic debug stuff. Using the message box like I showed you here is a great way when you're working with stuff to stop the script so you can see what's going on. But there are two other very, very simple ones that I wanted to demonstrate. The script has to be running for it. So, I can do let me see here. Can I do it? Yeah, I can. Actually, I don't know. Can I right click here? No. So notice the executable doesn't have the other options here. So I'm going to exit out of that. But I'm going to launch this one. And now it's running. That's, by the way, I don't think I mentioned that. You can double click the script in launch it. You could highlight it and hit enter, and return, and it would launch it. But in here, I can double click the script, and this is going to pull up this menu where I can say view lines most recently executed, which is, I think it was already there. It's the default. And here you can see it's on line 3, and it's waiting for more. But that where it is. And then if we had a variable, it would show it in here. And we're going to cover variables here and a couple more things. But these are two really simple, easy ways. Let's say you had tried to store a value in a variable, and for some reason in your message box or your script it's not showing it, and you wonder, like, is something going on here? A super, super easy way to get it is just to say, hey, double click here and let me see the the variables and their contents, and it's a great easy way to see what data is in there. The other one is to present the value in a message box or a tooltip or something else, but we're going to cover those in a while here. So that's it. I hope that was simple, and we're going to get moving on here to some more somewhat advanced stuff. Thank you. So the next topic we're going to cover is whether you should have your scripts in multiple versus a single script. And this sounds kind of confusing, because why in the world would you have multiple scripts if you can have a single script? And unfortunately, there's no real correct answer. The answer is it depends on what you're doing and everything. Multiple scripts, when I say that, so let's go ahead and get back in here now, where I have two scripts here, and they're very basic. I'm going to right click on this one, say edit. It's going to pop it open in Studio here. So this one just says hello. Let me come back. I'm going to right click on this one and say edit. And now this is the second one's going to say world, right? So, and over here we can see here's the first one and second one, right? So there's hello and world. And I can run, right now, look down here in my system tray. There's no green H's anywhere. So nothing is, no AutoHotkey script that you can tell is running. And I'm going to run it. So actually I launched the second one first. It doesn't matter, right? And then I'm going to launch the first one. And notice now we have two green H's. Here's the second one. Here's the first one. And they're both currently running. This allows me, the one thing it does allow me to do is to have more than one message box visible at a given time. Now, this isn't something I would necessarily want to do, but it has to do with the amount of threads you can have running, and AutoHotkey isn't really a multi-threading language. You can use some set timers, and maybe we'll cover that a bit later. But for the most part, it's a linear process. And if you have one message box pop up, that's going to stop your script from doing stuff. And so if you do have things that you want to be running concurrently, that's one reason why you would separate them. And you would have, I have this little screen clipping tool I wrote, and this is in AutoHotkey, and it's always running. I wouldn't want that to not run if I had a message box up, right? So I purposely broke this one out in a separate script. The other reason actually why I broke this one out, at the beginning I had it as part of my main script, which, by the way, if this is this Joe here, I changed the name of it, and I'll cover that later, how to do that. But it is, if we go to the bottom here, it's over 2,000 lines long. And when I had that screen clipping script in with it, it was, I forget how long that one is, but it's maybe, let's say it's 3,000, it's 1,000 itself, or maybe 800. And it was interwoven in this main script, which it all worked fine because it did what I wanted. Having said that, a couple people, I would be working and people go like, hey, that's really cool. I'd like to have that script. And then I would have to go through my main script and bring out, disentangle each of the little bits of it. And it was a lot of work. And so I kept that one separate. If we actually go here and I go to the task menu or manager and say start, so here you can see there's 1, 2, 3. There's 3 right there. Apparently I have the help file open, but then 2 of them are the ones that you guys already saw, right? But look at here. So here there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more AutoHotkey scripts running, but also note the size, right? They're not big. I mean, I have 64 gigs of RAM on my computer. 1.6 megs of RAM is nothing in space-wise. So the easiest thing to explain is as to why you put them all in one versus the other. I have a main one, which is the vast majority of the stuff of Hotstrings and hotkeys, which we'll cover later. But I have other ones like the start menu I mentioned. That's one of those that's running right now. I have one that's a spell check that's running right now. And then the screen clipping, I have one to toggle. It'll toggle my the program I'm in, any program I'm in. I click on it and it'll throw it to the other monitor. And so it has to do with compartmentalizing. Also about the threading of if you want it to be able to run independently from other things. And so that's the easiest way to explain it. But I did want it to note that you can see here, and in this one I changed the icon, and a lot of the other ones you don't see them here because I've said don't even display an icon because I just want them running all the time and I don't worry about having icons. So let me exit out of here, exit out of here. So that's the overall dilemma of do you want single versus multiple scripts. And when you first start scripting it's tough. You don't really know, so don't worry too much about it. For the most part, stick with one at the beginning, and then as you go on and you say, hey, I'm going to always have this thing running, maybe that should be its own thing. All right, we'll see you next time. Okay, in this session, I want to talk to you about directives, commands, and functions. And we actually have a couple examples here of directives. This #, no env, and # single instance. Those are both directives. And you can think of directives, there's actually two types of directives. There are positional and non-positional. The non-positional ones, it doesn't matter where in the script they are, whether they're the top or the bottom or anywhere in there, they affect the entire script. Think of them as like a setting for your script, whereas the positional ones affect the particular parts that you tell them to affect. So an example of a positional one, let's put in the #, they all begin with pound. We'll do when active, let's do when active. So when active, and then it could be, you put in the name of the thing. So we'll say, let's just say Notepad. This would be the window title. And then to turn it back off, you'd say when active without any parameters. So so whatever's done in here, in between the first when active and the end one, this is going to be one section. And then if I had, let's say I had another one, I'm going to copy all this, and I'm going to put this, let's just pretend it's AHK Studio. That's not what it is, but you get the idea, right? I think it is case sensitive unless you tell it not to be. But things done in the script in here would affect only Notepad, and things done in here would affect only things in Studio. So you can make it context sensitive. Like if you have a given hotkey or a hot string, when you type something, it'll act a certain way in one program and not in another. So those are the positional type of directives. And then I mentioned commands and functions. So commands, we demonstrated a command earlier. A message box is a command, and they're basically, you use commas to delineate them. You can see here are the options, right? They're kind of the old style. There's a newer style out, which are functions. And actually, you know what, let's do this. Instead of using message box, let's do StrSplit. We're going to do StringSplit for the command. Now here, it's going to say output array. We'll call it ARR. And the input var is going to be my var, and then delimiters, I would have that as a comma, let's say, and that's fine. So this is an example of a command. Now, the thing I don't like about commands, they work fine. They're very fast. They work fine, but you can't combine more than one in one line. And so at the beginning, it's not a big deal, but once you get a little more advanced, functions are really fun. And there's actually a function comparable for StrSplit, for StringSplit, which is StrSplit. So StrSplit, the string, which is going to be, I think that's, no, array is what we're going to say my var, and then the delimiter, again, let's do a comma. Now the difference here is we're going to assign it. So if I wanted to store it in the array, that's how I would assign it a variable. And we're going to cover variables here shortly. But what's really cool about these is I can actually stack these multiple times in one line. And so it can be very efficient. They're super fast. They're really flexible. We're going to cover how to use functions. There's a ton of built-in functions in AutoHotkey that you can use. Then you can write your own. So they're a lot of fun. They're very flexible. But I want to cover basically those three things. The directives, again, are kind of like settings and adjust your script. And then the commands and functions are how you execute things. Earlier, I showed you how to have multiple scripts, combining them into one. What I should have also somewhere in here add is that there is such a thing called an auto execute section in in AutoHotkey, and it's at the top of the code. Here is I've adjusted it. Here's the URL. You can go look it up if you want to read more about it. But basically, at the very top of your code, AutoHotkey starts running, and anytime it runs into any of the following here, so there's a return, an exit command, a hotkey, a hot string, or a label. After that, the things won't actually execute unless you trigger it somehow. And let's just demonstrate this because it's a little confusing. Usually doesn't come up for people until they start merging things into one script. And sometimes you'll find that you're trying to run something and you're like, hey, I put it at the top of my script and it works. And then I move it down lower in the script and it doesn't work. What's going on here? It's usually this auto execute section. So if I run this right now, of course, this message box works just fine, right? Because there's nothing in front of it. However, let's say I put in hot string. So let's do JLG period. Now when I run this, I just hit my I just launched it. It didn't execute that message box. Why is that? Because just envision there is a return. Like when I demonstrated earlier this, I think you should understand why this doesn't work, right? The script starts here, comes down, hits this return, stops processing, right? It can't get to this. Well, this is virtually the same thing as send and then sending that, right, with the return after. Same thing with a hotkey. So let me comment these three out. And if we put in control T, message box hi. So I'm going to run this and no message box. Now I hit control T, it works fine, but notice it doesn't go forward, right? Why is that? Well, that is basically, again, that is just like this. Right? It treats that return there. It's an implied return at the end of the hotkey. And so when you look at it this way, you can see why it doesn't work. And if we just move this thing above it and run it, we see our message box, right? And then I can still hit the control T to do the second one. So the same thing with a label. A label, it looks very similar to a hot string. That is a label, which we use with Go subs, which we cover later. But just remember, if you run into something where you're like, hey, this thing doesn't launch at all, or it only runs when it's in a certain spot, most of the time that's an auto-exec section type thing, and just study the structure of what you're doing. And, you know, the big thing is put a hotkey in to trigger it, and then usually you're fine, or break it out in its own script, and that way you don't have to worry about it. Cheers. All right, lastly, in this section, I want to talk to you about referencing variables. And this is a common form of confusion for a lot of people, is that we're going to store a variable, so let's just call it var, and we're going to store it with the colon equals, and let's say hello world is the value we're going to push into that variable var, var. So right now, I've stored that into var. Now, if I wanted to see that, like I showed you one earlier, I can save this. Actually, I'd have to do a message box with var, and let's run it. And oh, look at that! So silly me. That's funny. I just did a silly mistake here. I pushed up the text var, and so there's two ways that you can reference variables. One is to wrap the variable in percent signs like this. So when I run it, it is going to push in, instead of the text var, it pushes in the value that's in that variable, right? So now we did that successfully. There's another way though, which is the way I typically use, because just for me, it's a little cleaner to look at it. It's a little more confusing, but you put a percent sign after the end of your command or inside your function, and then everything to the right of it is an expression. And so in this case, when I save it and run it, notice there's a space in between the percent sign and var. So it does the same thing, right? If we wanted to have hello world, let's say, how are you after this, then we have to put quotes because we're inside of an expression. So, and of course I'd want a space in here, right? Because otherwise it puts it right next to it. So I'm going to run this again. And hello world, how are you, right? And that worked. So that's one way to do it. And I could have done it the same thing. This is an equivalent, and both are correct. So don't worry as far as which one is quote unquote right and wrong. This is going to do the same thing, because in this line here, I'm referencing it with the 2% signs, so the message box stays the normal way it is, and this is going to be text. So when I run this the first time, we're going to see the first version. So that's the first one, and now they came up with the second one. So they're identical. I tend to find, especially when I have several variables in it, that this one is easier for me to read and to write. because often I'll have a lot of variables that I'm trying to reference in just a little bit of text. So this is what you're going to see me, for the most part, almost always doing. Not quite always, but close to it. And I just want to clarify, because a lot of people get confused. And then there is a little bit of confusion of inside a command and a function, when do you use percent signs and not? And we're just going to tackle those as we go. But I wanted to make it really clear up front, because you'll see different things on the forum site if you go to the AutoHotkey forum, which is a great reference, or on Stack Overflow, of how people use them. Both of them are correct. Just make sure you understand they're both really doing the same thing. There's just two different approaches for it. It's one of the critiques of people for AutoHotkey is Python is great about, they make one way to do things, and it does simplify over time how you do it. But of course, it means everyone has to do things the same way, but it does make it easier where when you start reading the code, everyone understands it because it's just the one way to do it. All right, cheers. All right, in this session, we're going to cover hot strings. Hot strings are, they're to me, the lowest hanging fruit of being more productive. If I could get everyone to do one thing, it would be using hot strings, because they can simplify your life and allow you to be much faster at everything you're doing. We all have things that we type a lot. Think of them as text expansion. So on your phone, you can have it set up where if you type a couple letters, it will automatically offer you up the word, but fill it in for you. Or like in Word, the auto correct spell checking type things, it'll automatically do it for you. And they're super friendly, easy to use, helpful. Jackie Stuck and I have a Udemy course on them, so I'm not going to go too deep into them in this course, but it's one of the most important things I think that you can get to learn. So I want to make sure I at least mention them. And we're going to start off one here. Let's make one for hot strings. And so we start off with 2 colons, and then you put in some sort of an abbreviation. So I'm going to put HS and a period. I like using 2 to 3 letters in a period. It's really up to you, which is, and I already had this thing running here. Let me exit out of this because it did it for me. So HS period. And now 2 more colons, and then we're going to type hot strings, and I'm going to save this and now run it. Now, I want you to notice one thing here is that even though I don't have a message box in here, there's no GUI that came up, and yet the script is still running. And that's because hot strings keep your script running. They keep it persistent, and it'll stay in memory. So as long as you have a hot string or other stuff, which we'll cover later, you don't have to add the directive to tell it to be persistent. So let's go ahead and demonstrate, which is what that one little script that popped up there did. So when I type HS period, now when I hit space, notice it puts in hot strings and includes my space there. Right, so I can do it again, and notice how quick it is. It's great. Hot strings, you can have paragraphs and paragraphs of text replacement. This is literally sending the text, the keystrokes. So most windows work okay, but if you have a lot of text, there are some different approaches to it, and I cover them in that Udemy course. Basically, one of the simplest ways is you can copy it to the clipboard and then send paste, and that way it just dumps it all in there. Let's go ahead and cover another type. Let's say we wanted to have multi-line. So new 2 colons, and let's just say HW period, and then it's going to be hello, and then let's say I wanted a line break in between, or a new line. So that's the tick mark N, and that makes it start a new line. And so hello, and then we're going to put world, and save this, and reload it. And now when I come back in here to this, to Notepad, and type, I'm going to type HW period. Now watch what happens when I hit space or tab or anything. So it dumps them in there for me, right? And it's super fast and reliable. And the third thing I wanted to show you was, let's say you had an email address, because email addresses or passwords or things like that, not that I'm telling you to use these for passwords because your IT department may not like that, but it's a super easy way to put in something to have as a password. I'm going to first do it incorrectly to show you why it matters. So let's do JTA period. So that's for my email address, and that is joe@the-automator.com. It's funny because I don't normally type it. I usually have my other script running, which has a hotkey for it, or a hot string. So I'm going to run it, and notice also when I come in here and type JTA period space. So see where my cursor is? It left an extra space here, right? Well, if I'm using that to enter it into a form or to put into an email or something, I probably don't want that space there, right? Or let's say it was a password, that space would screw things up. So And the other thing I want to point out was notice the capitalization, right? I don't have to worry about how it's capitalized. So if you have like the name of a company and this capitalization matters, or you need the TM or something after it, right? It's great because you can do this once and then it's always consistent. So let's show you how to fix this. So that's the easy fix for this is if I don't want that space, I put in an O in between here. And now, and let's put a little comment here. So now I'm going to reload this. And now when I do JTA period space, watch, see where my cursor is? I didn't have that extra space at the end. So it's a simple, easy way to have a lot of text. There's one other thing I guess I should show, that there are special characters in that Hotstrings course, or you can look in the forum too. I'm not trying to push my other course. It's a lot of stuff and they're involved. So if you get into them, they're really cool, but they are pretty complex. So let's say I wanted to have goodbye world period, and goodbye, how about cruel world, because I want an exclamation point here. And I'm going to save this and reload it. And now what I want you to notice is when I do GW period space, see, there's no exclamation point at the end, right? There should be an exclamation point right here after world, and it didn't come through. That's because the exclamation point is a special key in AutoHotkey, and there's two ways to handle it. One is to wrap it with curly braces. So when I reload this and run it, now it sends it in there. The other way, so I'm going to hit undo, and I'm going to put an R here. That tells it to send the raw text. So now when I do it also, so either way they work fine. There are other special characters like the plus command, which is a shift. The pound sign is a Windows key. There are other keystrokes, but like I said, go check out that other course or look at the forum under Hotstrings and you can find all the nitty gritty. But this is by far one of the lowest hanging fruit if you want to be more productive today in minutes, right? You can start these. The other thing I want to say is find a pattern. I have hundreds of Hotstrings running it all the time, and find a pattern. So if you use like email addresses for other people other than myself, because I have like a dozen email addresses, but for other people, I like to put in their initials. So like for Jackie Stuck, the guy that wrote the AutoHotkey Hotstrings course in Udemy, for his email address, I'll put JS for Jackie Stuck, and then I put an E for email. And so I'll start his with this, JSE period. And then, so everyone I use their initials. Mine, if I was another person, JGE period, I would do it like that, right? And then obviously I'll put in actually I could put it in right here, but find a pattern for things that you use a lot that are similar, and it'll help you remember, because the only problem about Hotstrings is if you don't type them enough, you forget what they are. And then you have to go up and look at them, which defeats the purpose of having something convenient at the tips of your fingers. I tend to add stuff and use a pattern, and then don't add too many at one time. Baby step into it. Add 1 to 2 a day at the most, and just add a couple, and then it's a lot easier to remember them. Or do what I did at the first, was I printed them out. I printed them out in a little sheet next to me, and for the first week, I would watch them, and it helped me remember what they were. And then after a little bit of time, you start realizing that you don't need that lookup anymore, and you can really, really be more productive. All right, cheers. In this session, we're going to cover hotkeys, which is right after Hotstrings. It's another really great, easy way to become more efficient. There's a lot of different things you can do with hotkeys. One of the biggest uses, though, is just to launch something, to launch a web page, to launch an email, to launch a program, to run specific things. And so let's do a couple examples here. The first thing you have to know, there are more modifier keys, but here are the top 4. The Windows key is the pound key or the hash key. The control key is this caret, which is over the 6. The Alt key is the exclamation, represented by the exclamation point, and a plus is the Shift key. So let's do one. Let's see. Let's launch Notepad, and we're gonna say, let's say I want to make it where it's a Windows key. So in that case, I'll put pound, and I'll do N, and I'm gonna put 2 colons here, and I'm gonna say run, comma, Notepad. notepad.exe. Now, because notepad is it's in the path, I don't have to have, it's in the Windows path. I don't have to have the full path to the executable here. If it wasn't in my path, then I would have to include the entire path here without quotes. So I'm going to run this, and now I'm going to hold down the Windows key, and when I hit N, it launched Notepad for me, right? So this is a super easy way to have it launch programs. Let's say if I wanted it to be where, let's say Windows E, oops, Windows E, I'm going to say run, and let's do joe.glines, no, joe at v-automator. I should have left my hotstring running. So when I run, oh, actually, sorry, I forgot. This one has to be a little special here. It's a mail to colon, and that's just a HTML type thing. So I'm going to relaunch this, and now when I hold down the Windows key and hit E, Outlook opened the other window here, but it wrote the to with my email address and used my default email client, which also, let's say I wanted to navigate to my web page, which is theautomator.com, and https://. Now when and I can't have, actually let me try to run it here. And you should see right here, duplicate hotkey, right? You can't have a duplicate hotkey because then AutoHotkey doesn't know what to do about it. Hotstrings you can, it'll just execute the last one, not the first one. So this should be, let's say W for web page. So when I run that, now I'm going to hit Windows W, and it loads my website. So it jumps automatically to it, right? So if you had a specific file, you could add it as a parameter after this with the path to the file name, and it would load not just Notepad, but that specific file with Notepad or Word or something like that. The other really cool thing is, let's comment these out just so we don't get confused. Let's say comment, yeah, we'll do Windows C, and when I do that, I'm going to send the semicolon, a bunch of asterisks. Oops. Right now for auto, and then I'm going to add a return. A return will stop it from continuing on. And you don't need a return on these because they were just one line. This one I have multiple lines, and so that's why I had to have that send command on a separate line. So that's why it's needed. So right now, when I rerun this, I got to relaunch it. Now let me use this. What? Oh, because of I gotta put a tick mark here. There we go. That should, so this will escape the semicolon, and it was just saying, hey, there's nothing here because I had the semicolon, and that does an inline comment. So now I'm going to use the Windows N to launch Notepad, and now when I hit Windows C, it sends those keystrokes to whatever active program I have open. So if I had Site open and I hit Windows C, it does it here. Right, but what I wanted to demonstrate was, let's get these two where they're not overlapping. What's really cool is I can say, hey, remember the directives? So if, when active, and I'll explain more about this later, HClay, exe, I'm surprised it didn't show up in that list there. Notepad.exe. So right now I'm making this context sensitive. So for this Windows C, when that happens, it's going to do that. And then I'm going to copy this just because I'm lazy. And you know what? Let's do this. Let's put in here. I'm going to put in Notepad, and in here I'm going to put in Site, and this needs to change to, I think that's how it's spelled. So relaunch it, and now notice, even though I have Windows C twice, because this when active is present, I have two separate ones. And so let me come back in here and activate both of these. and get rid of the text just so we don't get confused. So now if I'm in Notepad and I hit Windows C, notice it throws in the word Notepad. That's because here. But if I'm in Site and I hit Windows C, it knows to do something different. And it's a small thing, at least it seems like a small thing, but when you realize you don't have to remember different keystrokes for different programs, you can tie the computer to look at what program you have active, and then if it's active and you hit the same keystroke, to do something different. I think it's a really powerful thing, because a lot of times you end up having the same hotkey, and yet you don't want to, you'd have to remember a different thing. So like this inline comment here is nice, because let's say in Notepad I'm doing one language that really needs to start off, it needs, like if we were doing HTML, it would be this, that, like, well, it's not quite. Yeah, I did something wrong there. But anyway, you get the idea. It would be something like that, and then that at the end. Maybe that is right. So I can have the same hotkey, and let's say I was just always using Notepad for my HTML stuff. And so when I rerun this, now I can use the same thing. And hey, if I'm in Notepad and I hit Windows C, it automatically comments out with the right wrappers for me. I don't have to remember what it is in each language, right? That's it. You can tie it to a program. You can actually tie it to users. You can do a lot of different stuff with the WinActive, or not just WinActive, but there's exists, and if the user is different and whatnot. But hotkeys are really powerful. That I could spend a day talking to them about all the little intricacies, and I don't want to go too deep on this, but they are an amazing quick way to do so. Oh, you know what? I should show one more. When you want to combine them, you can use the if it's one of these, you can say Windows, like let's say Windows Alt, right? So that would combine the two, or actually I use it like Control and Alt. So I can put them right together. However, with the apps key, which is if you have it in your keyboard, it's between, on the right hand side of your keyboard, between the Alt and the C, there's a little box with some lines on it. That's called the apps key. When you use it, you have to do it this way. Apps key and let's say C. And what am I going to do with this? We'll say send so I'm going to save this, reload it, and now let's go into here, apps key and C. So oh, that was interesting. Apps key and C. Yeah, that should send. Let's try it running something instead. So I'm going to relaunch it. Apps key and C. And boy, I did not like that. I don't think it's the plus sign. No, that's wrong. All right, so I paused the video here, and it's funny that I'm making these videos, by the way, they're raw, and the point is they're raw because I'm working through this, and I want you to see, you know, some of the troubleshooting and things that happen even for a person who uses it a lot, right? What I forgot to do was to turn off the context sensitive of my hotkey here. So right now, when I run this and I hit apps key and D, it doesn't do anything. It sends a D, but after I do this, that's going to say now, hey, you know what? Don't try to only pay attention. Actually, I could have run it in here, and apps key and D should theoretically work just fine. It launched it, right? But if I'm back here still, because I don't think I relaunched it yet, it just still sends the D, right? But now I'm going to save this and rerun it. So now I relaunched this script. Now, even in this program, if I hit apps key and D, it'll launch Notepad. So that was my bad. It's one of those things. you know, as you work and stuff, you start looking at it, and then you start working on troubleshooting. Well, what's going on? And I just started looking at my script. I went and got one that I had that I knew worked in something else, and it didn't work in here. And I said, well, wait a minute. I know that code's right. And then it just dawned on me of like, oh, I have these context sensitive things and I forgot to turn it off. So anyway, the hotkeys are awesome, and there's just amazing things you can do with them. Cheers. All right, in this session, I want to demonstrate both file select and folder select. So I got a little outline here. So we're going to start with the first example. Let's do file select file. And I want to do a multi-select. So first we need to store the output variable. Let's just call that var. And then options, an M. Of course, I can't see my notes, but I believe an M is for multi-select. So in the first example, I want to do a multi-select. So I'm going to put an M here. Now, if I wanted to tell it where to start, what directory to start in, I can put in a path here in on the next variable. So notice I'm in here. All right, so that's the next parameter for this command, and I'm going to leave it as where it is. That's going to choose the default folder it's running from. When you don't give it one, it'll choose the one that's in. And then the prompt is going to be the title bar. So I'm going to say select some files because this is multi. And then I'm not going to give it a filter. We'll work on that later here. So I'm going to run this, and notice it jumped to the folder I was in. Up here it says select some files, so that's where I was adding that parameter. And in here, notice I can select multiple files. Oh, you know what I didn't do was I didn't put a message box here. There we go. I'll rerun it. Now when I select a couple files, you're going to see it put those files, and it does an interesting thing. It puts the entire path to the first one, and then it leaves out the folder and then gives you the rest of the other ones in that directory. So you'd have to do a little bit of processing on this to parse it out. I think you can loop over them, if I remember right, and get them. But as you can see, you can easily select multiple files. Let's do the next one here, where we're going to change it, and we're not going to do multi, but we're going to do a single, and we're going to save a file. We're going to change it instead of saying, actually, what did that say here? It doesn't say anything. It just says open. I'm sorry, it does say open. See this open right here? Well, what if we wanted that to be a save? Come over here. Let's comment this one out. File select file. Again, we want to put it into var. And then I don't want to have an M. I'm going to have an S here. And then sometimes Studio stops refreshing. Here we go. So we'll leave the path the same. Actually, let's put in the path ptemp. So it's going to start in my temp directory, and then under the prompt, save one file. And I'm going to save this and reload it and run it. And now you'll notice we're here in the temp directory, and this says save, right? So if we were to click this, it's not going to do anything, right? This is just giving you this interface to do stuff with. And notice I'm hitting files.txt, and this is going to return the path to that you would then use like file append or something else to actually write the file to that path. But it's really cool that you have this easily accessible interface to help you write your code. You don't have to go create all this crazy dialog boxes and everything for this. So that's that. And we'll repeat this one for this, but we're going to add a filter. And so after the prompt is the filter. And for that, like, let's say we can do, actually, I don't know if I have any star.ahk. And I think here, yeah, default file name. So temp, save one file. This is the one I was talking about. So I'm going to put it blah.ahk. And now you're going to know when I run this, oh, I did something wrong. I'll have to go back and look at it. Let's see what I did wrong. Oh, I uncommented the one above it. That's what I did wrong. So this is correct, right? But notice I left both these open. So it did this one and then went to the next one. And here now it did pipe in the blah as the default one, but you can still change it. it also is only showing you, because I filtered it, right? And actually I can still undo this and show all, but that's what this is doing here. And if you want, I think, to have multiple, I think you put in a pipe. So let's comment that out. Let's rerun this. And now it could be, oh, maybe it's not a filter. Oh, it's a semicolon right after it. My bad. So semicolon here, and it looks like a space. So now, see how it's either one, and it's showing both AutoHotkey and text files. So if you want to have a multi-filter, and you can keep adding on to that. So that's using the file select. Now let's, oh, I hit cancel. Let's do the folder select. So I believe that's just folder. Let me see here. File select folder. Yeah. So it's right there. Output will still use var. Starting folder, let's leave it blank for now. Options. This one I don't really change many of the options with. I'm just trying to get a directory. And so I'm going to leave that blank, and prompt is, and let's make sure we do a message box here for var for what we find, and I'm going to run it. Now this gives you a nice easy way to select a folder. I can select this, I can hit OK, and it's going to show me the path. And so basically I'd have to do something with this, right? But it gives me the path to that directory. The other really nice thing here is I can actually, make a new folder under it. And so I can pick it here and say, oh, I don't have one that I want. I need to make one. And so I can go ahead and make one. So I think both of these are really helpful when you're trying to write a program that you want users to interact with, to find a file on their computer or to save a file on their computer. And yet you don't have to build the GUI and all the stuff behind it, right? These are built into AutoHotkey. So enjoy those and do some practicing. Cheers. All right, welcome back. In this session, we're going to cover mouse clicks. And now I don't normally use mouse clicks because, generally speaking, there's far better ways to automate things. The big concern is that, for the most part, when you send a mouse click, if you're using the mouse, it's going to interfere with the mouse click. And so that's why I don't use them. Having said that, we all start somewhere. I still do send them at times. And it is a very convenient, easy, cool thing to be able to do. So let's start off by just demonstrating. Look what happens here if I double click on force. Right, so it highlights the word, right? So the simplest thing we can do here, besides turn off my caps lock, is we're going to do a double click. Now, when I run this, notice, actually, I shouldn't even click there, right? Let me click over here. Now, just notice where the mouse is. Now, when I run this, it highlighted force. Why? Because it looked at where my mouse was and sent a double click to it, right? So it's that easy. Now, of course, if I have to move my mouse somewhere every time, it kind of negates the whole purpose of automating, right? So what we want to be able to do is to detect the coordinates and then send the mouse click to a given coordinates. And for that purpose, that's why I had a notepad open here. Let's pretend this font window's open. Let's say I wanted to click this OK button. There are better ways to do this, but this is an intro course, and so we're learning just the basics, right? So the first thing I'm going to do is, I think it's get mouse position. Maybe it's mouse get position. There we go. And we need to store the X coordinate in a variable. So let's put it in X, and we're going to store the Y coordinates in Y. Now there are some other parameters here, but again, this is an entry level course, so I don't want to do too much. And let's go ahead and put that information up. Let's just put in a tab. So you can, this is a special way to put in a tab in between the characters and Y. So now when I run this, you're going to see a set of coordinates. So there's the X is 482 and Y is 278. And if I put it over here, X is 1437 and Y is 601. Let me grab that because I can't remember anything. And now what we're going to want to do, we don't want to double click that. We're going to want to click it. And it's going to, it should have, ask for the coordinates. Now, when you use things in a variable here, so we don't need these, and we're going unfortunately, you have to put them in this format. So click, oh, actually, I don't even want that. I'm sorry, 1437, 437, comma, 601. All right, now when I launch this, it's going to move my mouse down here and click it. So let me run it. And notice it moved my mouse down there, click the button, and it's that simple. Now there's, like I said, there's other ways to do this. There's things we're not going to cover in this course because they're just too advanced, but dealing with controls, I'll have that in the next course. It's a intermediate at the minimum, and they're super handy and helpful. And the great thing about sending control, both control keystrokes, like instead of sending the keystrokes where it's typing it out, sending the keystrokes using controls and the mouse clicks, is it doesn't interfere with your script and whoever's using the program. So it can be done. The window can be, offsite. It can be wherever, and it needs to be, it needs to exist. But you can send controls to it and click things and submit things, and it's a much better way than just sending mouse clicks and keystrokes. Having said that, again, this is just entry level, getting us started, getting us into programming, and so I didn't want to cover it in this course, but we'll get on to our next one. Thanks. I'm just checking back in with you. Make sure you're following along. Make sure you're working on it. Isn't AutoHotkey amazing? It's so amazing. I love it. It's changed my life. I hope you start adopting it and it changes yours, because it just makes everything easier. Again, this is just a pull out. It's a segment of the entire course, which you can get. I'll put it above my head here. Is it there? Oh, anyway, I'll put it in here and check it out. Or you can just keep watching this course. The tool is so amazing. I make the courses. Yeah, I'd like to make some money, but honestly, it's really to help people, have a better life. So check it out. Keep plugging along. I know this is a long video, and that's the great thing about in the Udemy course is it's broken into like 2 to 3 minute sections. And also in the Udemy version, you have all the files. I have all my syntax files, so they're all available for you. So it's much easier to kind of follow along and to adopt. So keep plugging along. Hope you make it to the end. Cheers. All right, now in this section, we're going to get into assigning values to variables. AutoHotkey, it's really great compared to a lot of the languages. Many other languages, you need to declare the type of variable and do a lot of other things in order to work with them. AutoHotkey is super simple. It also takes care of all the garbage collection, is called. It'll free up memory when it can, so you don't have to worry about cleaning out things after you've run them. And when you exit out of a script, by the way, it's all gone from memory, so you don't have to worry about that. So let's start off with X. Oh, of course I typed Y. So X. Let's say we want to set X to the word start. X equals start. Now, of course, how would I know? There's a couple ways we could do this, right? But first, we're going to start off with just message box. Make sure you throw in a %, right? Start. I'm an idiot. X, right? Now I'm going to run this, and our message box says start. Why is that? Because we took a variable X and said, hey, the colon equals, right? That's how you assign a value in AutoHotkey. Colon equals, say, make X push this word start into that variable, and then I'm going to display it into a message box. So when I say here, now if this was, let's say I start 2, now it completely overwrites what's there. So this first line is going to put start into it, and then the very next line, it's going to say, now let's put 2 into it and get rid of start. So when I run this, we should see 2, not the word start, right? That's because it just completely overwrites it. Now, let's say we wanted to append some more text to the word start. Let's say it's end. So X, this is where you use the period equals, and let's put in a pipe, just so we can see how close it is. More. So I'm going to save this and run it. And notice the appending, right? It kept the word there, start, and then appended more. Now, one thing which we should cover here is, let's come back and say, what if this was a number, right? So I'm going to comment this out, save it, and run it. And AutoHotkey, it's pretty good about keeping track of, hey, is that thing a number? Is it a text, alphanumeric type thing? Or I shouldn't say alphanumeric, just alpha. And it will convert it. It first starts off as a number because then we can do math on it, but then it converts it into a string value, which then it can append the more to it. So that's what we're doing there. The next example I want to do is a couple with addition. Let's go ahead and let's use Y for addition. So I'm going to comment those out just so we have them handy. And now let's do Y. There's no reason. I'm just, I should also go in and mention the different variable, the type of variable names we can have. I'll give you a link to the documentation of it. Basically, start off with a string value, and then you can have numbers, and you can't have spaces, but you can have numbers and other characters. There are some characters you can't have, but for the most part, it's pretty straightforward. So colon equals, and now let's put in a value here of 10, and let's just verify this message box %y. Oh, I can't type. Here we go. And run it, and that should be 10. Now let's say we wanted to add to that value, right? So an easy way would be y is plus equals 2. Now that's going to take the initial value and then add 2 to it. So I save this and run it, and notice it's 12. It's not 2, and it's not 10, because it took the plus equals as a special thing, so we can add to the value. Let's comment this one out, and then I'm going to say y minus equals 2, save and run, and now notice it's 8. So it's how we can subtract. Now this is equivalent. Look, we could do it this way, right? We could say, let me comment this out. Let's stick with the positives, just easier. So y equals y plus 2, right? This would work as well. This will still be 12, right? It still works fine. But what's nice is this takes into account, you don't have to type this over, right? It's just a shortcut hand way to do it. And it works with subtracting as well. It's just an easier shortcut way than writing out. Sometimes, like when I'm starting off, I like using it this way because in my head, I fully grasp what it's doing. But after you get used to the other way, then it's nice and it's short and tidy. So there are 2 others I wanted to mention. So let's say you wanted to increment y by 1. So what's really cool is you can say y plus plus, and now when I run this, it's going to be 11. Right? And when I run it again, that's because it starts over. It's still going to be 11, right? That's because every time you relaunch it, right? It's taking, oh, you know what? Let's do this. Let's duplicate this line and then move it up above. So we'll show here, it starts off as 10, and that's where we're on line 10 right now. And then the next one, it shows it's 11, right? I've added 1 to it. So now I'm going to duplicate that and change it to minus and relaunch. And so that starts off as 10. Again, we're on line 10. And then it's down to 9 because I subtracted 1 from it. So it's the same thing as saying y equals y colon, sorry. Let me do it. So y equals y minus 1, right? This will give us the same. There's 10, there's 9, gives us the same value. Again, it's just a shortcut way. They do come in real handy. I think we're going to cover loops at a later time, but in loops, they come in really handy, easy ways to increment what you're doing as you go over the stuff. So that's what I wanted to cover in this session. Assigning variables, the more advanced you get, the more this stuff comes up a lot. There are also, I'd say there's probably another 10 or so different types of assigning of a value that you can do, and I rarely ever use them, so I'm not covering them, in this course because they're there and you can go find them, but they're just not used that frequently. Okay, so in this session, we're going to be reviewing how to detect whether conditions are true, false, any of the basic logic things. And I've laid out here some of the examples. There are others, and these are by far the ones used most frequently. So let's go ahead and start off with the equals. So basically, let's say, let's first define up above x equals 10. And now here, we're going to say if. I always like using the parens to help tie it together and say, this is what I want you to look at. So I'm going to say if, now x, now here's where we're just the equals 10, and Notice how Studio automatically netted me. That's because it knows this is related to the thing up above it. It's conditional based on the thing above it happening. So let's say message box x equals 10. So I'm going to run this, and we should see, because... Oh, leftmost character expression. Where am I wrong here? Oh, look, I had the semicolon too close. There we go. So here, x equals 10. And of course, I could have put this as, let's put a percent sign. You know what? I haven't demonstrated this before. Let's do this. So here's a percent sign. That means we have to wrap this in quotes. And now I'm going to, oh, not the x, my bad. Here we go. So here's what I'm going to save this. And now it's going to say 10 equals 10, right? Because we're treating this as a variable, and we're comparing that to that. Well, we're not actually doing the comparisons up here, but we're saying that. Now, what if I didn't want to use the percent signs the way I did here? I mentioned this before, and it's just good to see it at least once. So I'm going to say percent. Now, what that allows me to do is get rid of the rest of these double quotes, right? Because everything else is going to be treated as text. So that's the same thing. So that was the equivalent. Now, what if I save the, I change this to be 11, and now I rerun it, right? So x equals 11, and this says, hey, if x equals 10, do this. When I run it, nothing happened, right? And actually here, let's put a message box. So now when I run it, it gets to there directly, right? Well, it tried, it came in here, did this expression. Because it's one line, it'll do just the next line. And then if it's, if this was true, let's change this back to 10. You'll see it'll do both, right? Because it's going to run, and it's going to pull in that 10 equals 10 because this was true. It does the one line. And then after we say, okay, then it gets to here because it keeps going, right? I would like to demonstrate here. Let's go ahead and put in some brackets. And now anything I put inside here it will run, if this is true, it's going to run both of these. So I'm going to run this now. It's going to do that 10. Now notice, because this is inside the brackets, right? It does the line 6 as well, and then it gets down to there, or I should say here. And in the 11, save and reload and run, it's going to jump right to line 8, which I should really say line 8, right? But of course that changes as we put stuff. But the braces it helps you tie together parts of your code on what you want it to work on. If it's just one line, you don't need the braces. So again, if it's like, this will still work, right? That actually still works. But the braces are unneeded, so you can either do it this way. Let me copy it so I can show you. So that way works, as does this, right? These two lines are the same exact equivalent as these 3 lines. And that's just a simple, it's a built-in way in AutoHotkey. If your if statement doesn't have a brace, it'll do the very next line, and that's it. And so I'll use this if I know I'm just going to have one thing there. But normally, get used to putting the braces in, and then the brackets in, then you can be used to it regardless, because it'll work either way. This one, I've run into trouble where I forget to go back and add the brackets and our braces, and it ends up messing me up because they're not tied together. So anyway, all right, that's our showing to say that they're equal, right? So that was the equals, x equals 10. Let's do a string here. Joe, if x equals not here, just so you hit, so it has to be in quotes for that, right? I'm going to launch it, and Joe does not equal 10, but you still get the idea, right? It said, yeah, x equals Joe, and then Joe, if x equals, quote, the string Joe, then go ahead and do this message box, right? And that's actually, that was It did say Joe equals 10 because it was piping in that variable there. And so that's what we're tying in the variable. But what I wanted to show was you do have to put in, for the strings, you need to wrap them in quotes, right? Both in the conditional check as well as when you define it in the value here. If we put this just as like this, that will not, I don't think that will work. It shouldn't work. Yeah, so it didn't know what to do basically. So it still actually ran, which is scary. But the second we throw it back into quotes and run it, then it works fine. So, okay, so that's the equal. Now let's do a not equal. So let's say, instead of it's just if X, let's do colon equals Joe. So now it's not going to equal Joe. If it doesn't equal Joe, then say now this will get right to the here, right? Because it does equal Joe. But what if this was Joe E and I rerun it? So it doesn't equal Joe E, or Joe. Sorry, my logic is right here on line 4. So this is the logic right here. And we checked, and if it doesn't, and by the way, spaces and AutoHotkey, you can have extra spaces. It doesn't matter, right? If I rerun this, it's the same thing as if this was right next to it. So for the most part, white space and AutoHotkey, not always, but most of the time, with your conditions and expressions and things, they don't matter. So that's the not equal. Now for the next two, we want to do greater than or equal to or greater than. Let's change this back to a number. Let's stick with 10. And let's say X is greater than 9. True. So we're going to run that. And now X, which has the value of 10, is greater than 9. So now let's actually change this to less than. Oh boy, I messed that up. There we go. Now now when I run it, it says it's not true, right? Because X is not less than 10. I'm sorry, 9. Because X is 10. Let's say X is 11, right? 10 is less than 11, so that'll be true. Great. And now let's say, what if we change this to 10? Now this is not true, right? Because 10 is not less than 10, but we can do the less than. I always get confused if the equal comes first or after. So less than or equals to 10. And now that comes down to true because 10 is less than or equal to 10, right? And obviously the greater than one works the same way. Let's change this to a greater than sign. And now that will still be true because it's still has the equals in there, right? And that still comes up because we don't have it here. I could do it as a conditional and say if this or this, and we're not doing that yet. So, but for now, that'll work just fine. Now, the next one we're going to do is the and. So we can test for multiple things. So let's say X colon equals 10, Y colon equals 10. Right now, let's change this back to, let's have an and this is what I like using the parens for. So I'm going to say an and keep it in capitals. Y is equal greater than, let's say 10. So that one's not going to be true, right? Because let's say if X equals 10, and Y is greater than 10. So that's not true because Y is only 10. When I run this, it's going to say not true. However, if I change this to be Y equals 10 and I rerun it, now it is true because both of those conditions, and we can keep adding in more and more and more with the and statements, and we can use other parens to help tie things together. And so That's an example of using the and. The or means either one of them. This or this can be true. So in this case, let's go back to here, where let's say this is 11. So x is equal to 10, or y is greater than 10. Now, in the and, this didn't work, right? Because they both had to be true. But this one, it will work because only one of them has to be true. And again, we could have more on there on this. But these are the basics of using logic and AutoHotkey. Again, remember, these curly braces, those tie your groups together into code that are tied together. So everything within this section is going to stay the same under the same thread or the same process. And it's tied to this logic here on line 5. So that's the basics of doing logic and AutoHotkey. There are, like I said, there's other ones. There's some cool stuff called a ternary, which allows you to do some very complex things all in one line, but those are advanced. They're very fun and helpful. But this is just the basics. Cheers. Hello, everyone. And today we're going to be going over functions. Functions are, to me, the lowest hanging fruit as far as if you want to step up your game programming. They're very easy to get going. It does have a little bit of a learning curve, but they're super, super powerful. We just covered Go subs, which are handy and helpful, and they definitely can be very convenient. But functions are basically like Go subs on crack. I mean, they allow you to do so much more and customize what you're doing. So let's just jump into it here. I'm going to go ahead and create our own function. Now, AutoHotkey has built-in functions that we're going to cover here in in the next session, probably, or the one after. We're going to go through some of the most common functions that I typically use and I think are used. But we're going to create our own here to help you understand the whole concepts of functions. So let's just start off by creating something called myfunc. And now these two paren. Now we haven't created a function. The second you add this part, now we have a function. And there's no, these, if we have like a x, comma, y, comma, z, these are parameters. Each one of these is a parameter that we will be passing to it. And so let's do a message box, %x, and then we'll change this to a y. Hey, you know what? Let's throw them all in one, and we'll separate them by tabs. A_tab. This is a built-in variable, so to speak, of it'll insert a tab. So x, y, a_tab, and z. The case doesn't matter. Now, a function itself, if I run this, nothing happens. Functions in themselves don't do anything. You have to call the function. And what's interesting in functions, I can do it below it. So I'm going to call my func, and let's put in 1, 2, 3. I'm going to save this now. When I run it, now you see it created this. It got to here. It went past this saying basically defining it. And then it came down here and said, oh, call my function or my func. And then it's going to jump in here and it's going to pass. This is the x, this is the y, this is the z, right? And it comes in here. Notice, so I can change this to 3, this to 2, and this one to Joe. Let's just change it entirely, right? It doesn't matter, right? The order matters. The order these are in matter, not what in this case, I'm passing text to them. I could pass, and again, AutoHotkey is pretty flexible, so if I change this to a number and run it, it doesn't error out, where a lot of languages would say that's an invalid value for what you're doing. So right now, we're just passing variables to there, and let's demonstrate if we wanted to call this twice. So here's my func, and I'm going to call it again. I'll just change this one to first and this one to second. So save, reload. Now it's going to run. Again, it skips the top part. It doesn't skip it, it processes it, I should say. So it comes through here, and then it gets to here on line 11 and does the first one. And now when I hit OK, it's going to get to the second one, right? So this is a great, easy way to have multiple things and to be able to adapt what it is being done inside here that is going on. So in a Go sub, you can go there, but you're not changing parameters. You're not changing anything in it. And so it has to be identical in that way. When I first started using AutoHotkey, I was creating a lot of Go subs, very specific. And I realized, hey, you know what? This Go sub and this Go sub, these labels I'm jumping to, they're virtually identical, except for I'm changing like one or two things. And that's what functions are great for. Now, there's some more complexity we're going to get into, but I want to keep these sessions, nice and short. So this is just the intro to using functions. I also, let me point out here. Whoa, wrong hotkey. Here we go. So if I move this up above the definition of the function, it doesn't matter. Nothing changes. So the way AutoHotkey works, it'll go through and basically look at the entire script. First, it'll say, oh, here's a function definition. I'm going to use it, but I'm not actually going to launch it. And then when you go to run it, it goes and says, hey, let me call this function. It knows what that is. It's in memory. And it'll go and pass the parameters to it. So after this, we're moving on to scope, because scope is confusing, and I want to keep that separate because it's a little complex. And that's one of the things you'll run into doing this. Is it's one of those things that the first couple times you use it and get confused, you'll hate this, but it's worth it. Trust me. Cheers. In this section, we're going to cover a lot of the frequently used things in AutoHotkey. And start off, we're going to use functions. Now, before I actually get into the frequently used functions, I want to demonstrate a couple really simple and easy ways to use functions. It actually works for other things as well, but functions is how I mainly use it. And there's one is using an include. But first, let's go back and let's build a function so we can see it. So my func here, and we'll put a message box just saying hi, so we know when it runs. All right, now this function is in this file, and if I run it, of course, it works just fine. But what if I have a lot of functions, and wouldn't it be convenient, or let's say I want to use this function in a different script, and I didn't want to keep having the same function in every script, right? It'd be great if we could put that somewhere and then access it as a separate file. So I'm going to you know what? Let's see here. Yeah, I'll do this. I'll get rid of this top part. No. I'll just copy it and hit new, paste it. But I want to borrow, let's go back to here, copy file path, and then we'll go back to this one. And we're going to save it. Now what I'm going to do is I want to save in that same directory to start. And I'm going to call it the name of that. So it's called myfunc. The function name is myfunc, and this is important. You need to name it the same name. The file name needs to be the same name as the name of your function. And so in this format, you can have one function in the file. There is another way. It's more advanced. I'm not going to go into it, but you could have multiple functions in a file. But this way, this is just the one. Now, I notice I stored it in that folder. And now when I come back to this one, it's not actually going to run. Let me demonstrate it here. Oh, sorry. It's the includes. Here we go. And so now I'm going to delete it from here, and I'm going to try to call myfunc and save this. And now when I run it, it says, hey, call a non-existent function, right? That's because I saved it in this local folder here, but what it really needs to be, there's 3 places you can put it. I'm going to build a new folder and call it lib. Capitalization doesn't matter, so if you want it like that, that's fine. And I'm going to move it into here. So now, notice it's in here. And now when I run this, it works just fine, right? So there are 3 places. Let me give you my little cheat sheet. One is the local script folder /lib, and so you stuff it in there. The other one is under my documents, which I don't actually even use. I don't know how to navigate on my computer, but there'll be a folder called AutoHotkey, and you can put an lib folder there. And then under the currently running version of AutoHotkey. So let me actually show you here, and we're going to cover this later, but it is a cool thing. So I'm going to do a message box %, and now there are built-in a underscore hk path. So, and you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to store this on the clipboard. So I'll have it on my clipboard and I can just paste it. So when I run this, it shows me this is the path of where I have AutoHotkey, this script is running from. Now I can stick it, that's what this is representing here, this b:/prog/AutoHotkey/L. That is the folder that I would want to use in place of here. See, actually it has a whole thing here, but we want to go up and we want to put in a lib folder. So now if I come in, let's open a new Explorer window, which is Windows E, by the way. And I'm going to navigate to here. You'll see there's an lib folder here, and I have a lot of functions. I actually cleaned them up. I don't have as many as I used to, but I have a function library here of different functions that I have created or borrowed and copied over time, and I can put any file I want in any of these three locations, and I don't need to use an include, which we're going to cover here in a second, to access it. So again, I can create that function, whatever the name of the function is, and stick it in any of these three locations, and my script will run just perfectly fine. Well, let's go back to the original folder. I'm going to cut this and we're going to move it up. And I'm going to put it here. And you know what? Just to show, we can get rid of this now. I'm going to relaunch it, and it says, hey, this is a non-existent function, right? That's what I demonstrated at the very beginning. We can get around that by using an include statement. And it's funny, it asks, Studio does this, not other ones don't, but it asks which ones do you want to include. And so you can include it this way. Now this can be, well, I'll do it here just to demonstrate. So save it and run it. And I notice, I'm not sure why it's not running. Is it? It is not running. You know, so here's a good thing of troubleshooting, right? Let me put another message box and just see. So for whatever reason, it's not running. Let's go, you know what, let's just go and double click. So here, this is just a good way to troubleshoot, right? So includes, this is the one we're doing. I'm going to double click it here. Now it ran. Something happened with my Alt-R, apparently, so that's the high. Interesting enough, it should have. Oh, look at what happened to my file. This is weird. Something happened to my file. Let's go back and edit this. The path I noticed at the top of Studio, this somehow got wonky. It was missing. So now it's high. Oh, I noticed it didn't actually save this part. So now it's going to do both. So high here. And again, this is where we can say, now if this wasn't a local file, this is the path we can put it in. This could be anywhere, right? Let's take this myfunc file, and I'm going to cut it, and just for fun, let's put it here in my B drive. Is just a fake drive, by the way. It's for my Dropbox. And so I'm going to put it here, and now notice it's not in any of those locations, again, like the other one was. And I'm going to change this to be b:/ and save it and run it, and it still works fine. Why is that? It doesn't have to be in any of those locations. I can put it wherever I want. I can reference it this way, and it'll work. You can actually include, you can just create a whole different file. It doesn't have to be a function name. That's for a function library. You can, if you wanted to call it anything you want and then give it the name here, it's going to go there, and you can have files in there that it will include them. It's a great way to break up your code when you start writing longer programs. I predominantly use it for storing functions. And let me show you real quickly here of how you can have multiple functions inside of a script. So like I have an Excel library I've created. And what you do is you name the file, you just don't have any underscores before it, right? So it'll be like XL, right? So that's what I did. It doesn't have to be XL. And then every function inside your library needs to start with the XL, that abbreviation, and then the underscore. This allows me to have one file having all of these functions in it. And AutoHotkey then knows, hey, when we go here, the thing that begins with XL is going to be in this XL.ahk file. So it's a great way to build up a library of, I'd say at least dozens of functions for using Excel. And that way I just have, I don't actually have to include it because it's in, if you look right here, it's in my main AutoHotkey library. And so that way I don't have to use the include command. And it automatically just goes and searches there. So I hope that makes sense. It's a great way to be able to keep your main script clean and parse things out. And again, one of the big things about functions, right, is I can put something here, and then for all these, like getting the pointer or opening Excel or doing stuff, I don't have to keep those in all these different places and then have to go find it and then go paste it in my file, right? I just point to my library and say, go use my Excel library. And then when I make an update, it updates for every script where I've used that as a reference. And so it's just a much cleaner way to develop code, and then it's easier to stay focused and to stay up to date. Cheers. All right, this session, we're going to be manipulating strings, and strings meaning text. So I do this a lot. It was really surprised me how much I end up doing it, but it comes up a lot. So there's a lot of other ways to do it, but we're going to cover some of the big ones that come up a lot frequently. So StringReplace, this is a really simple function, and we're going to replace the haystack is what you're looking in, right? Just think of it as a haystack and you have your needle, right? So that is going to be since we're inside a function, you don't need the percents. So that'll be txt, because that is, notice it's what's up here. It's what we're storing our text into. What we're going to search for, that is going to be a string. So we're going to search for, let's say, brown, and that's what we're searching for. And we're going to add a comma, and this, what do we want to replace it with? Let's say blue. And now I'm going to do a message box after this. And you know what? Since we're going to be using the same string, I'm going to dump it down here just so I don't have to keep moving it. So when I run this, notice instead of saying, notice I did something wrong. Brown. Oh. I didn't assign it back to, there we go. Yeah. So it did it, I just didn't store it. If I had done a message box right here, like if I get rid of this and put my message box right here, it's fine, right? I didn't change the variable, but I'm displaying it. This is what I alluded to earlier when you're using functions. But I'm gonna go ahead and stuff it in here. I'm pushing the results back into a variable. It doesn't have to be the same variable. It could be a different variable. This could be Bob for all that matters, as long as I put down here Bob when I display it, right? But notice it replaced. Now let's get back into it. Replaced the quick blue fox and blue dog, right? Well, what if we just want to replace the first occurrence of it? So that actually is a functionality here. This is the count. Now we'll go and stuff in here a variable called CNT, and then limit it, we're going to say 1. If you put a -1, that means don't limit it, but we're going to say the first one. So here, now let me save this and run it, and the first thing we'll notice is now it says the quick blue fox and brown dog. It only replaced the first one, right? But what could also be cool is let's throw in a tab and then say CNT should show us how many occurrences it found, right? And I guess because we had this limited to 1, is it the recurrences it did, apparently. Let's change let's just get rid of that and rerun it. And so it replaced it twice, and so this will tell you how many times it replaced it, which sometimes is very, very helpful, right? So that's the replacing of text. We can trim things, and so we're going to trim text, and let's we're just going to run it first, and notice, you know what I need to do is, let me fix my message box down here and do a couple things. So we're going to put a quotes and a pipe, and then another quotes and a pipe. And this will help us see how these pipes are right next to the text. If I turn this off and rerun it, there are spaces in between those, right? So the trimming it defaults to trimming white space. If we wanted to change that, we can add a character after it. So let's say, let's leave this one as it is, and let's make up a new txt equals 00, 32. Oops, I was supposed to write that in quotes. And then txt colon equals, oops, not trim. And then what are we trimming? We're going to trim the txt. And now we're going to omit characters. That's what the omit characters. I don't really like that term myself. It sounds like things I don't want to do. But let's put in here a 0 and run it. And notice it trimmed off the zeros, right? From there, if I put it on the right side as well, it did it from both sides. Now let's say we just want to trim it from the left side, not the right side. So there are two additional easy ones. We can say ltrim will just trim it from the left side. So notice the 0 on the right side, the 220, right? It's still there. Or let's say we just want on the right side, we can do right side, right? So it left the zeros on the left. It'll work with the spaces, with whatever. So the ltrim, rtrim, and just trim. Those are three ways that you can easily get rid of characters that are, on the ends, which happens more often than you'd think. In-string is a great way to see if there is a value inside the string you're looking for. So let's do, so actually we don't want that. We're just going to do a message box here, because this one, we're not changing anything. We're just checking for a value. So what are we looking for? It's the same txt, but let's go ahead and comment that out. You know what, let's change this to an MB and an MB, and I'll put a message box here. And this way, let me run that, make sure it works. So when you guys see this, they're different. Oh, and look, I broke, so I didn't finish my other one. All right, here we go. Okay, so that one still works. I just didn't want to mess with the original one, and this way they're separate. So back to this one. So txt, and the needle, this is what we're looking for. Let's look for Fox. And notice it says case sensitive. Oh, I got to add the comma if I want it. So do we want it case sensitive? A 0 or a 1 is probably what we put there. Let's leave it not case sensitive. Starting position, if we only want to look at a certain spot, we would put this in there. In the occurrence, let's say we want to find the second one, right? We could put that. So for now, let's run this. And it's saying 18. What that means is, and let's take, actually, it should be right there, I think. That should be, I'm going to copy this, paste it here. That's 16. I would have thought that this should be, oh, it looks like it did that. Oh. Column 16. That's interesting. Is Studio is automatically trimming, and so this is where Fox is in the up above. And notice right here, the F is the 18th. I'm looking down here. Column 17. Again, position 1049, column 18. So this column right here, that's saying where it's starting, right? So that's what it's returning. So the fact that it returns any sort of a number, let's say this was Fox DD and we rerun it. Oh, it won't run because of this. We rerun it. It returns a 0, means it didn't find it, right? So that's a way to check if it's in there. If it does come back with a value, then you know that it's found it and it tells you where it is. We could also just change this to a not and run it, and it comes back as a 1 because it is correct. It did not find it, which is what that's saying, which is weird. It's a negative checking for a negative. So that's the in-string. That one can be combined with a lot of other ones, which are really helpful. Stir length just tells you basically txt, how many characters your text is. So this is 35 characters long. If I highlight here to here, I believe down below here, we should see column 40. Here we go, count 35, right? And that's what that message box was telling us. That's the length of that value. Substring is really cool. We'll call this sub equals substring, and here we're going to say, all right, what string? We're going to look in txt. That's what we're looking for, and the starting position. Let's say we'll just start with 1, and the length is going to be, what's our first word? The. So we'll say 3, and save this. And now let's show a message box. I could have done it right on that same line. Sub, and it picked up. That's interesting. Oh, I'm sorry, because look, I have that space at the beginning right here. So the first 3 really are 1, 2, 3, right? And so it is the th that we see here. So I should have said 4, right? So if I wanted the, but then I actually should have trimmed it. Now let's actually say, let's put the pipes in here like we have down below to demonstrate that the space is on the left there. So notice how there's the space between the pipe and the T. What we can do, this is the cool thing with functions, right, is we can actually wrap this in that other function, right? So now when we rerun it, notice there's no space there, right? And it worked. But just to be clear, right, this is what we had on the line up above, and then we wrapped it with the trim function, and so it can all be done in one. And even then, if I didn't need to actually store that, I could just use that in a command. I don't have to have it : equals here. I could just put a message box right here and just display it, right? Oh, what did I do? Line 14. Oh, notice, come on. That was the problem. So now it'll run it. So, oh, but I didn't have the pipes. But anyway, it does run fine. It would use it, but we don't have to store it is the point. So let's put that back there. Okay, so StrSplit. This is one of my favorite functions. It's very, very cool. Let's say that we wanted to split the txt, and what are we going to split on? We're going to split it on spaces. So we'll put in a space here, right? And so we're going to put parsed, and now parsed dot one. Oh, I forgot my message box at the front. Message box, and run it. Oh, because let's do the second one. So it takes your string and parses it on what you told it to parse on, right? So we said parse on the space, and then unfortunately the very first thing is a space, and that's why the dot one came back with just the space. The dot two is the. Let's go ahead and add. Oh, I forgot. Let's put in a tab and a tab parsed dot for. So what it's doing is it puts it into an array, and then you can see here I can keep incrementing it, and it is parsing this on the spaces, right? So that is how that is working. It's a really helpful, easy way to do it. The other really cool thing about this one is like I've said before, right? If we didn't really need to save that variable as a, and then use it, we're just going to delete it. I can just call it straight up and say, let's get the fourth one, and I don't even need to store it in the array, right? I can just call it directly, and I can use that in anything. So I can change to the fifth one, right? So if you're trying to grab a specific thing, it's a really, really helpful function to be able to split things. And you can split it on, that's what, let's for say whatever reason, we want to split it on every, let's say E. I know there's not, what are many, it's kind of funny. I picked let's do B. I see a couple B's. And so let's get the second B. Oh, I'm hitting the wrong key. So notice it took out the B, right? Because it's saying parse on it, but it's getting everything to the right of the second B, which is brown fox and up into the next one, right? So 3 is going to give us round dog because it's parsing off the B's, and it's going to give us everything up until the end, or until the next B, which it didn't run into, so it just gets us to the end. So that StrSplit is a wonderful function. I use it a lot. The next one, sort, it's not necessarily for manipulating text. However, let's say you had a multi-line. No, let's just bring that down here. It is quite different. And I'll put the whole word text. Oops. I'm going to copy that so I don't have to keep typing it. This is a... You know what? Let's do it. I'll finish it this way, then I'll convert it. Multi-line. So let's put up a message box, save it and run it. Oh, look, I forgot my equals. Colon equals. Ah, and I can't type. So this is a multi-line text, right? So I was using the tick mark N to break it across lines. And now we'll go ahead and leave it at that. Let's say I wanted to sort text, and I'll just leave it at that. And the default, I believe, is ascending. So notice how it changed the order of everything, right? It's a great, easy way to change the order, and it automatically will parse it on a line break or a line return or a new line. I forget if it's a line return or new line. Obviously, it's a new line because it's working fine there. I think it'll use either. Having said that, that was for the ascending, and then I think D is descending. Apparently not. Options. So let's look it up, right? F1 brings up the help. I'll bring it over here. So sort case sensitive, numeric, at least you can sort it numerically, which is sometimes comes up. Reverse or, oh, that's interesting. Why would you, that's weird. Okay, but it's a R is the one I was thinking of. U, which will also demonstrate here, it can dedupe it, which also comes in very handy. So R, let me rerun this. So it sorts it descending, I guess because they have the numeric sorts, that's why they said you can reverse the sort and they didn't have to worry about ascending, descending, I don't know. But there's that. Let's put in a U, and let's put in a couple of, I'm going to duplicate this and put one above it. And then we'll do this a couple times in a couple different spots. Oops, should do it in front of it. So there, and there, and there. Now when I run this, notice how we have A multiple times. Now watch the next one. A is only listed once. There's actually a blank line somewhere, apparently, but it's only listed once. And that's the U makes it unique or deduping it, which is very handy. It's a very cool functionality. Comes in super handy and is super easy to use for the most part. All right, that's the other ones. I'm not going to get into them. This regex stuff down here, regex match and regex replace. It's a really complicated topic, but I did want to bring it up because regular expressions they're pattern matching things, which I will use them. I try to use them sparingly because it's somewhat complex, but they can solve problems that like you would never believe. So they're really helpful and they can be really save you a ton of time than trying to use a lot of the other stuff. All right, cheers. In this session, we're going to talk about some of the shortcuts in writing syntax, as well as some built-in variables AutoHotkey has. AutoHotkey has a ton of built-in variables. I'm not going to cover all of them. I'll show you where you can look them up, but some of the ones that I use a lot, I'm going to at least describe and maybe demonstrate a few. So right here, let's pretend like you had this message box and you really wanted to go multiple lines. You wanted to use one message box, but you wanted your syntax, rather, to go on multiple lines, because we're getting kind of over to the right here, and let's say it would keep going, and it's just easier to read it if we put the continuation part, like right now, this just says, hello, how are you? I'm doing great. What else is going on with you? But let's say we wanted to have some more text in there, and notice I have the 2 line returns. Actually, these are new line feeds. What you can do is put a period, and then that is going to, it's a concatenation kind of thing. It's kind of, it's going to append what's above it. So, not much. How are you? So I'm going to run this, and you'll see now it threw it in there, right? And again, the new lines, they're not required. They're just helping me see how it's breaking. So I'll run it again. And again, this is just to help you, be able to go back later and read your code and have it easier and more concise. Sometimes you have something really long and it gets very confusing when something is way over there or it's off the page and you have to scroll and you can't see the other side. So I like using that. The other cool thing we can do, the one thing I don't like about this is then I can do the Shift F1 in Studio. That'll comment it out. Otherwise I got to come out each line. But a comma can be used to, let's say you were defining 2 variables and for whatever reason you wanted your x : equals to be 10 and your y to equal 20. And now here I'm going to put up a message box, x, and actually let's incorporate the ones below. There's some special characters, and I've demonstrated like the a tab, a_tab. That's going to throw in a tab. I could do this, that is equivalent to doing this with a tick mark T, that's a tab. But to me, typing the double quotes is just not as pretty to read. I got to make sure I close my quotes, which Studio does a better job taking care of that. But I like using the a_tab, and then it reads, it doesn't jump out at me the way other stuff does. And Y, so we run this. Oh, what did I forget? I forgot my %sign. I do that a lot to make it into an expression. So 10 and 20, right? Well, what you can do is you can put a comma here and move that up into the same line. And AutoHotkey will actually say, oh, you know what? He's defining 2 variables here, and you can just have them on the same one. Not everything allows for, like commands don't allow for that, but functions, defining functions or using functions. I shouldn't say defining functions. Using functions, function calls, you can do that stuff with it. If you define a bunch of them, again, you can just have them. Actually, they're numbers. I don't have to put them in that. But and let's use the a_space here to show this. Show z. I'm going to run it. And so now you can see the 20 and 30 are closer together because I use space instead of the z. Another thing I like to do is I put it in a file that I included everything. And what I do is I come in here and I say a_, I call it enter, is it's just because it's a bad name. It should be like line return. And I'm going to equal that to tilde tick mark. Let's do r tick mark n. It can probably just be one of those. But now what I can do is I can use that down here. Oops, a_enter. And now when I run it, you'll see it puts down the Z onto the next line. And again, there's no trickery here. It's not it's not a built-in variable because I created it. However, I just stick this into a file that I always include, and then I can just throw in a line break without having to put the quotes and this kind of stuff in there. Not a big deal, right? But for me, I just like being able to have that. I wish that was the default thing. So that's with the special characters. Now, let's look at the other thing I should mention is not that the stuff that most people do with AutoHotkey performance, it's almost irrelevant, right? Things happen so fast. We do simple things. It doesn't matter. But apparently defining your variables this way as opposed to this way The other way can be a bit faster in the efficiency. So when you can, you might want to do it this way. Again, it really won't matter for what we do. So it's special characters. Now let's get into the built-in variables. Let me pull over here the help file, and if you search for help on like built-in variables, you'll see there are a lot. Script property. Here we go. So here's the special characters, and then here are things that begin with the A underscore, right? These are built-in variables, and I'm just going to show you these quickly. By the way, these date and time ones, super handy. Also, AutoHotkey has a built-in calendar that you can use to pick a date and time. That to me was a bit advanced because I didn't really touch on GUIs. GUIs to me, everyone I talk to, they're much more complicated. So I didn't want to do that in this training course. But maybe another one we'll do entirely separately. But you can see here there are what I'd say at least like 100 built-in variables. So I'm obviously not going to cover all of them. But it's definitely something, if you're doing something, you might want to look at. I do want to highlight a few. So we covered earlier, I believe, the working directory and script directory. Well, actually, I don't think we covered working directory. That is just, you can change the working directory to be a special place, which isn't where the script is running from. And so you can look at what it is, and then you can set it as well. The script directory, it'll say where that script is. The script name, that one I believe we also showed, and it will show you the name of the script that you're currently running. Those are nice. This, here are a bunch kind of around like Windows and things with Windows. So it's the OS version, right? The type, I think that's the bitness, like 32 or 64-bit. The screen height and screen width, which is really cool because on the program you're looking at, it's the dimensions of your computer screen and width and height. Where your documents are, where your startup folder is. So if you're installing things, or if you want to check if a program's been installed, you can get an idea where that path is and go look for it. The A programs, I demonstrated the A programs files earlier, but this one's a little bit different. The app data, so a lot of programs will save data into your user's app data, and I should have put it in here, but here's a computer name, and then there's, I think it's username. And so that will show, the user that's currently logged in. And sometimes like the computer name and the username, if I have the same script I'm running on multiple computers and yet the paths to where files are installed, I'll use that computer name to use some logic and say, hey, if its computer name is Godzilla, which one of my computers was, then look here to launch the program. If it's Smith, whatever another name, then look elsewhere, right? I also did it with usernames where I was writing a similar script, but they had a little bit differences. They wanted it, but I didn't want to have multiple scripts. So I used a username to look at the username and say, hey, if it's Jim, do this thing. If it's John, do this thing. And if it's Joe, do something else, right? So it allowed me to have one script, have it all together, and yet it would look at the computer and look at your Windows settings and act differently. Here are some of the date timestamps. So I think the first one, ADDD, is the day of the week. And then the month. All right, let's do this. Let's do message box. Now, I should just highlight them all and do a search replace here. Oh, especially because yeah, search replace is much more efficient. Actually, we know what the hour, minute, seconds is going to be, and then let's move this one over to here, and we'll comment those out. So I'm going to run this. So Thursday, that's the month, the day, it's the 27th of June, 2019. This is the A now, which is a great one to know about. It's a timestamp that you can pull from any time. You can do math on time with AutoHotkey. It's really easy once you get the hang of it. Again, it's a little advanced, but there are tutorials out there for doing that. The other one, too, that I wanted to mention is we touched on earlier in the clipboard and A index. I'll leave that here for a minute. So let's say one is I want to see what's on the clipboard. Actually, let's stack the deck, right? Let's copy that. I'm going to copy that, and now I'm going to run this. And hey, I just shoved, I copied it, but then I can see what's in the clipboard. But let's say I actually wanted to set the clipboard. So now let's show the clipboard. So now I have set it, and then I'm displaying it. And there are things that there's a way to check to see first if the clipboard has a value in it. And first you have to blank it and then check to see if it's valued. Again, it's a little more advanced. But if you do run into problems putting data into the clipboard, just know to look for a thing that says, hey, does the clipboard have data in it yet? If it doesn't, then we'll pause until it does, and then you do something. But why would you do this? Well, let's say you were working in a program. Let's put a hotkey here, and we'll do Control-T, just because I know I don't have anything to that. So, and you know what? This shouldn't really be inside here, because I don't want it every time to copy it. Every time I hit my hotkey to go stuff something in. Oh no, I do. My bad. Every time I hit the hotkey, it's going to go, because the problem is, of course, I can be running this later, and something else might have overwritten my clipboard. So each time I want to shove something into the clipboard, and then I'm going to say send, and then if you remember, the caret is the control, and then V. So I'm going to save this and run it. Now nothing happens right now because I made a hotkey for it. But if I come out here and hit Control-T, it pasted and send Control-V to wherever I am. So I can do that anywhere. Actually, that output window's in. I say that I can do it anywhere, and then that output window's a little funny. So if I hit Control-T right there, or this one should work from site. I accidentally hit it twice. But any windows, and sometimes when you're trying to send keystrokes, it doesn't like sending the key the control you're sending the keystrokes to doesn't like to receive keystrokes. Having said that, often you can click there and hit paste, and it'll dump your text in. And so sometimes this is the way you want to go if you're having problems sending paste. The other one is if you have paragraphs, like in one of my examples when on Hotstrings in the Udemy course, I think I dumped in the Declaration of Independence, or maybe it was it doesn't matter, but I think it was Declaration of Independence, and into the clipboard. And then I was trying to send keystrokes, but that's a lot of text to be sending, and it's literally sending those keystrokes, right? And it takes a while. When you send paste, it just dumps that text in like that, and it's over with. And it's a much better way when you're dealing with big text that you're sending something. The very last one, which we didn't cover, loops. I'm not going to cover them in this course just because I easily can write a course on doing different types of loops in AutoHotkey, and I probably will. But A-index is something that you will end up seeing a lot. And so just so you know, it's basically every time you're doing a loop, it's going to increment the A-index is where you are in that loop. So if I just say loop, this is one type of loop. And I'm not even going to have anything here. I'm going to say a message box. So I didn't put any sort of restrictions on how many times it's going to run. Oh. But I need to get rid of this because it would never get to it, right? So here we go. So I'm going to run it. And I notice this is 1, 2, 3. So all it's doing is between line 27 and 28. It's looping there over and over and over because it's one line. Otherwise, I'd need braces. And just keeps incrementing. And so that's what the A-index does. It just shows you what increment you are on that loop. And so I'm sure you'll see. I wanted to show it because when you go to the forum, you'll probably see examples of other people having done stuff with it, and I just want to make sure you understood what it was. All right, cheers. Lastly, when you're trying to troubleshoot your script, here's some questions to ask, some process to go through. The very first one, it's silly, but I've had this happen to me too. Is it running, right? Do you see the green H, which I have one here? It's running. Is it in the system tray? If it's not there, chances are that's part of the problem, right? Maybe you launched it and it executed and exited before you even had a chance to do anything. The very next thing, just because it's Windows, Reboot Windows, right? It's a very simple way to test it. Possibly stop all of the scripts and programs. So maybe just after you reboot, don't launch anything else. Just have that one script. Don't have any other program open unless it's required for the program. Try it on a different computer. Sometimes it's just these are ways to narrow down to see if it works in a different environment or something. It helps you pinpoint what the problems might be. You might want to try running as an admin. You can right-click on the script and say Run as admin, and that is a one way. It doesn't necessarily cure it, but it can help point you in the direction of what's going on, and then you can basically build into elevating your script to run as an admin. You can temporarily turn off the UAC, and just Google that. You can find some things about the user account control. Generally speaking, unless you're someone expert, I don't recommend turning it off entirely. I turn mine off, but I also understand I'm the only person using my computer, and I know not to run malicious stuff that I download from the internet. Is your script context sensitive? So if you've set it to do a certain thing in one program and not the other, turn that off. Just try to see if it'll work. And if it works, then, then you have a direction of what you should work on. Does it work in only certain places of your script? So there's the auto execute section at the very beginning of the script, and if you put something down beneath here and it's not getting to it, right, that could be the problem. Try moving it up into a higher point in the script. If it does what you think it is, maybe you have a problem with the auto exec section. When you're actually troubleshooting, the first thing I do is do your best to narrow it down to just one thing, right? This is the thing I'm working on. I'm not doing all these other things. Sometimes it takes a little bit of work to customize your code to do that, or even take what you're trying to test, put it in a separate script and run it there and just pinpoint it. Use message boxes. I mean, there are more advanced tools in which I didn't cover, but like AutoHotkey Studio site, I believe Notepad++ has debug features which are really helpful, but they're advanced, and I felt they were beyond the scope of this course. But they can help you peek into sides, especially tracking where you are when you run it, and it goes to a go sub. So question everything, question what you're working on, question your assumptions, question does that variable actually have the value in it? I think it does, and that's where using those message boxes to help show you. Boy, so often it's funny. You think it's something else, and it's not really that. It's somewhere earlier where you were out of scope in the function, something like that. It's something simple. And there's this other thing called error level. A lot of the commands in functions have error level things you can check, and it'll return a 0 if there were no errors and a 1 if there was an error. Again, I didn't cover that because it starts getting advanced. But there's a link here. I'm going to put all the links to this stuff as well. And then I have some more here. When you go to seek help, right? First confirm it's repeatable, because if you can't get it to repeat, you can't really explain or ask someone else for help with it. I would typically start off searching the AutoHotkey forum, Stack Overflow, Reddit. Those are good ones. Those are the main ones I go to see if anyone else has reported similar issues, or of course just use hit F1 in whatever editor you're using and bring up the AutoHotkey help. It has a lot of great documentation. When you go to ask for help, again, trim it down to the simplest thing possible. And if you can include, like if you're going to a website or doing whatever, if you can include that, it's not PII or too much information or, something private, then great, include it in there, because people need the context and need to be able to test it, like in the environment. Also mention the OS you're doing, the version of AutoHotkey you're currently running, what other programs you're connecting to, what else is running, if there's some major thing running. And then here's the order I would go in depending on, one is your timing. So like Discord is a live chat where people hang out, and often they're there. The people are there are very helpful. They're very patient. And they can give you some live support, but you got to be ready to work with them. Stack Overflow and Reddit, those are decent ones. I would actually go to the AutoHotkey forum if you weren't in a burning hurry for an answer, because the number of people that hit the forum is really big, and you can often get a response, I'd say same day easily. The Stack Overflow and Reddit also, people tend to hang out there. So, it also has a repository of past things that people have solved. So you can search for a solution there, but you can pose, other questions there as well. Stack Overflow is for the really minutia, like little, snippets of stuff. That's usually what I go there. I also might even in Stack Overflow look at other things. Like if I'm doing more advanced stuff, I might look at some other languages and see how they solve it and then try to adapt it. But when you do it, what's great is break it down. If your script is 1,000 lines long and you're only having trouble with these 10 lines, extract out the 10 lines, make a way. Maybe you have to add 2 or 3 lines to help make it run on its own. But give those to the people, because it really helps the person be able to help you. And a lot of the people I see that work in support, they do an amazing amount of stuff, but if you don't give them the right information, it's really hard. It's one of my favorite stories is, a short question requires a long answer, and a long question requires a short answer. And so if you spend the time writing out a longer question saying, this is what I'm working on, here's the context, here's the version of AutoHotkey and the version of Windows that I'm doing it in, the environment in, this is specifically where I am, this is what I've looked at, and this is the problem, can someone help? The chances of someone giving you help and answering that for you are greatly increased, as opposed to saying, can someone fix my script? It doesn't work, right? Also, obviously, both for SEO and just for human interest, the title you give that question really helps draw in the right person. It makes sure it's meaningful, it's relevant to what your problem is. Usually, typically mention the command or the function that you're working with, and it's really it helps people, experts in that area, realize. My ears would perk up if it was a specific area like web scraping that I'm very fluent in. I would go and look at that question, as opposed to you have a vague topic and just with please help fix my code. I personally would never go look at that because I don't know what it is and you didn't spend the time to help me understand it. So spend a little time up front and it'll help you in the back end. Cheers. Okay, so that wraps it up for what we have to offer here. As I said, this is just a subset. It's an extraction of some of the most interesting and fun and exciting parts of my Intro to AutoHotkey course that's on Udemy. Again, what I would do is go to my site. I have coupons where you can buy it for cheaper. Or, hey, just go to my site. I have a ton of free other, links to other stuff like web scraping and learning Excel, API calls, regular expressions, learning functions. I got a ton of free stuff. Look at this YouTube channel, right? Subscribe. Don't forget to subscribe. Or go to their my site and get the Udemy course. It's the cheapest if you go to my site. You get a coupon code and check it out. Keep learning AutoHotkey. The AutoHotkey forum is amazing. And there's I actually have a page on my site called the Ultimate Resource, AutoHotkey Ultimate Resource page, which has a lot of other links for great help. So I hope you enjoyed learning this. Keep plugging along. Take care.